Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. Happy Friday. I am totally late. I apologize. And for those of you that are on Instagram, I am coming on. I have started something a little bit new for the new year, and I'm still trying to get adjusted to it. For those that are on Facebook, I'm going to be switching to my Redeeming Life. I'm on my Redeeming Life Nutrition Facebook group instead of my personalized group. I shouldn't say group, my personalized Facebook, because I think that this is much more applicable to my business and what I am trying to promote, the message I'm trying to promote with my business and with my practice as well. So, with that, there have been a lot of things that have been transpiring this past week, and I probably have a lot of content that I need to cover. But I think one thing I really wanted to hone in on is particularly it's January, it's getting colder, and there is a lot of illness that's going around. One of them in particular is COVID. But we have had to face COVID for now 5 years, I want to say. So that's been, let's see, it was March. So it's going to be about 5 years in March. And we've been hearing about the ramifications of COVID and some of the things that I'm going to talk about. I'll share a little bit about my story as I have talked about that I went from a relapse last January to running at a half Ironman in September. And now I'm actually doing really well. So there's a lot more research when it comes to COVID and the manifestations and the long-term symptoms. We've been seeing a lot more long COVID so that those symptoms can actually be latent in your body. So I'm going to give you a little bit of education about that as well. Some of the things that you can do as preventative measures to really keep your body performing its best and well, really be having the best well-being that you possibly can. All right, so with that in mind, I'm going to introduce myself. Hello, my name is Drew Mulvey. I am a certified dietitian nutritionist, board certified nutrition specialist, and certified integrative sports nutritionist. Obviously, I'm specializing in functional medicine and integrative medicine in particular, but I call myself a vitality specialist with all of those different certifications. Now, with that in mind, I work with several individuals, when it's athletes or non athletes, to really help them to recover their quality of life so that they're not only performing their best, but they are living out their best life and they have the most abundant life and long life that they possibly can. So, with that in mind, I'm going to talk about COVID. So, what exactly happened 5 years ago, almost 5 years ago? Well, aside from the country shutting down, everybody was freaking out because COVID was attacking so many people and attacking so many things in your body. So, what exactly does COVID do, and were there those manifestations? Well, COVID, we most of you have probably looked into this, but what makes COVID so violent is something called a spike protein. And with that spike protein, it causes a lot of inflammation in the body. I was going to say something else. It causes a lot of inflammation in the body. And what happens is that people who have had any sort of pre-existing conditions, even way behind, it can start to activate again because of that spike protein. There's actually been a rise, get this, in the past 5 years, there's been a rise in autoimmune conditions. There's also been a rise by, okay, that's by 800%. 800%. And there's been a rise in multiple sclerosis, which is up by 900%, which could potentially be attributed to COVID and this spike protein. Now, what does it mean for you athletes? Well, if there is a lot of that inflammatory, I should say, if there's a lot of inflammation in your body or underlying inflammation, it can significantly impair your recovery. It could significantly impair your heart rate variability and your heart rate, which means that you aren't going to be able to get as fast as you'd like to, and your heart rate's going to be spiking, and you're going to be fatiguing a heck of a lot quicker than you would normally. It can also start to affect your brain. It can start to affect your heart as well. It can create that little bit inflammation around your heart. So, what are some of the manifestations that we've been seeing long term? There has been a lot. I've actually been working with some clients recently that has long COVID. Now, my story, I'll actually speak to them where they're seeing these manifestations going on and on because the spike protein, it affects your joints as well. So it can actually start to attack collagen. We also know with COVID that it affects the telomeres. So telomeres, they're basically little casings on your genes, right? And so every time your gene splits and starts replicating, they get smaller and smaller. And that's the whole thing about antioxidants and anti-aging is we're talking about telomeres and we're trying to preserve those telomeres. Well, the COVID actually tends to attack those telomeres in particular, which can then have an effect on several different processes in our body and particularly increasing a little bit of inflammation. If that's attacking our joints and our collagen, then we are going to be getting injured a heck of a lot more, and we're not going to be able to reach those goals that we really would want. So, those are some of the things that we have to keep in mind as well. Other things that have been seen with COVID has been microclotting. Microclotting that could lead to embolisms, that can lead to strokes, that can lead to a heart attack. It can lead to several other things. And let alone for those of you that are long endurance athletes, or I should say long haul, I shouldn't say long haul endurance athletes, but like even ultra endurance athletes, really high endurance athletes, like a half Ironman, you know who you are. There's already an elevated risk for us developing cardiorespiratory or cardio events just because of the inflammation that is generated from really long periods of either cycling or running or just being that active. Which obviously, one of the best things that we can do is start to attack the inflammation that's in our body, especially with that microclotting as well. We need to pay attention to that. So, what are some of the things that we can start to integrate into our nutrition plan, integrate into our lifestyle plan, and really integrate into our, well, a whole plan so that we can start to mitigate some of the results, mitigate some of the, well, the negative results from COVID. And if you are suffering from long COVID, here are some of the things that I also implemented. So I'm going to talk about my story. I got COVID. I didn't get the vaccine, but I got COVID 2021 going into 2022. That was probably the sickest I've ever been. I was shot. And at that time, I was in really, really good shape. I was doing triathlons, I was running, I was lifting, I was doing CrossFit. And at the time, I would be walking maybe to the kitchen and I'd be out of breath. I had the worst headache. I just was completely down for the count. And for about 8 months, yes, it was 8 months because I remember the day that it broke. I could not breathe very well. And what they've been saying, it's not necessarily that the COVID that's attacking the lungs, but it can be the COVID with the inflammation that's attacking around your heart, which makes it harder to breathe. So, with that in mind, because I had those long haul symptoms, there's that inflammatory response that was going on. I couldn't breathe very well. I remember the day in August where it finally broke, and it was a week before. At that time, my biggest endurance event was going to be the Olympic triathlon. Well, I did a century ride, but that was going to be the biggest endurance event when it comes to triathlons that I was doing. And from there, I was doing okay 2022, and then there were some things that were thrown at me that I had some challenges. As some of you know, I got hurt training for a half marathon at the end of 2022. I almost got a stress reaction in my tibia, which I didn't do the half marathon, obviously, and it took time for me to recover from it. I did actually end up re-injuring myself later, but what was happening during that time is, yes, I had these added points of stress, but that January I was starting to feel very lethargic. I was not feeling well. I wanted to sleep a lot more. I started to have like this exercise intolerance that I hadn't had before. I shouldn't say I hadn't had before. I had symptoms that had mimicked fibromyalgia, which I had had in my 20s. Now, one of the things that happens when you do get COVID is there can be a reactivation of that autoimmune condition. So then I started to get a little bit better, a little bit better. And then I was able to finally get to a point where I could train for another half Ironman. Again, I did get injured 3 weeks beforehand. It really takes a full year for you to recover from that. But then the next January, the same thing happened. And that was this past January. January of 2024. December of 2024, I was starting to feel very lethargic. I was starting to have burning in my muscles again. I was starting to have brain fog. I didn't have that, I had that exercise intolerance. And that's when I found out that my ANA markers were starting to elevate again, meaning that there was some sort of an antibody reaction, meaning there was an autoimmune reaction. So here I am preaching to the choir about being healthy, and I did everything in my power to be healthy, and this still was happening. Now, this had been in remission for a very, very long time. I've had stressful events happen, and I didn't have like a huge activation of fibromyalgia. And so what I did is I did some deeper digging into this. I had to restore a lot of things in my body. I got a lot of alternative tests done. I had to change my nutrition up, change my lifestyle. And from there, this January, I'm probably feeling the best I have felt in 3 years, like 4 years. So going into 2021, I was obviously feeling great. So that's 4 years down the line. Now, what are some of the things that COVID also attacks is because of this inflammation, it can attack your gut. There's a lot of people that complain of digestive issues afterwards. If there's any sort of inflammation in your digestive tract, then that's also going to impair your intestinal function and can create these little, probably creating little holes in your intestine. And that's where the food sensitivities come in as well. So, what are some of the things that you want to implement? Say you have had COVID or you have had the vaccine. Interestingly enough, I just listened to a webinar and they were talking about every time you have the vaccine, you have exposure to that spike protein. So that there is that inflammation there, and that is why there are potentially things that are going on in the body. But what are some of the things that you can do, especially now that we are in the season of illness and disease, so that if this does happen, it can prevent chronic long-term issues? Well, first of all, we need to focus on having a nutrition plan that is going to be very anti-inflammatory. Now, this is perfect for January. I try to emphasize for January that you don't go from 0 to 100, but you meet yourself in the middle and you try to make healthier decisions and healthier habits and create those healthier habits. Now, when you do go on an anti-inflammatory plan, it should be something that is very unique for you, and that's going to take some biohacking to create uniqueness for you. But there's different types of anti-inflammatory nutrition plans that you can integrate in, just making sure you're sticking to those whole foods. Modifying, I would try staying away from gluten and dairy for at least a month and see how you're feeling, as those tend to be a little bit more inflammatory. Interestingly enough, there is a glyphosate and COVID connection where that can exacerbate it too. So that is the GMO wheat. So going non-GMO is another really important thing. Getting your fruits and vegetables, buying by the Clean 15 and Dirty Dozen so that you're not being exposed to all the toxins and the pesticides. But do the best you can with that. Incorporating foods that are going to be very anti-inflammatory. So wild caught fish, so sardines, tuna, obviously wild caught salmon, cod. Those are some of my favorite foods to integrate. Some nuts and seeds. So seeds in particular, pumpkin seeds, hemp seeds, chia seeds, and flax seeds are very high in omega-3 fatty acids, and they are very anti-inflammatory. But omega-3 fatty acids are also anti-clotting. Remember what I talked about is that COVID can actually create that microclotting. So this can be a preventative measure that you can take in order to keep yourself healthy during this time, or if you have gotten it before, so that it can potentially prevent long-term effects of COVID. And also help you with recovery from training. I mean, there's been several studies about omega-3 fatty acids helping with recovery, better muscle recovery, decreasing cortisol levels so that the cortisol isn't affecting your muscles. And obviously, it's going to be helping your joints and connective tissue so that you're going to be a happy camper and you're going to be training really well. That's really important, right? All right, so we have an anti-inflammatory nutrition plan. Now, how about lifestyle factors? Sleep you've all been hearing about this, but who of you are actually implementing a good sleep hygiene pattern? Who's on their phone until 11 o'clock at night and then they're waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning? Getting very little sleep, being exposed to electromagnetic frequency. I mean, all of those things put a stressor on the body. But also, what helps too is that when you are sleeping, your body actually, the lymph system, helps to clear out debris from your brain, which will help with that cognition because some of the symptoms of COVID is that issue with that brain fog and neurocognition. If you're not clearing things, the garbage out, then that's going to accumulate and that's going to create a little bit more inflammation as well, which you want to try to protect your brain. So getting enough sleep, but also getting enough sleep, your melatonin is elevated, and that is a really, really potent antioxidant that really helps with recovery and just really helps your body to heal altogether. So that's another thing that you can really implement. Looking at your sleep hygiene and documenting what you're doing beforehand. What I really like to do, I shut my phone off at 8 o'clock at night. I'm in bed by 8:30, 9 o'clock because I'm up at 4:15. But I do make sure that I integrate that sleep hygiene and I'm getting enough sleep. That has been monumental in my healing journey from this long COVID and fibromyalgia. So, other nutrients that you can include that are going to help you, say, if you do have COVID or to prevent long term symptoms, coconut oil. I know this sounds really weird, but coconut oil has a compound in it called lauric acid. There's actually been studies done with this that they gave patients well, I shouldn't say lauric acid, but they gave patients coconut oil with the lauric acid, and their symptoms from COVID actually resolved a lot quicker than the control group. Now, monolauric acid, you can get this as a nutrient. It's an antiviral, antibacterial, antifungal, I mean, anti anything negative. So that's something that you can integrate. Plus, the great thing about this is that you can actually be on a long term dose of this that's preventative. I believe it's 600 milligrams of the monolauric acid that's like that preventative dose. So that it's an antimicrobial and it's also going to keep your immune system functioning properly as well. So, other nutrients that you want to include, obviously, we're talking about vitamin D right now. So, we want to think about this that, and I've really been thinking about this too. Why is it that illnesses tend to increase during this January and during the winter time? Well, our circadian rhythm is a little bit off. There is less light to dark. And with that comes, well, there's changes in serotonin, which can affect our mood, which overall can affect our whole entire body because that affects the HPA axis and that can put a little bit more stress on our body. So, with that, modifying things so that we approach our circadian rhythm, so integrating nutrients, electrolytes are going to be very important. So, potassium and magnesium, making sure that those stay regulated. B vitamins in particular to make sure to make sure that you're producing energy. Now, one of the things that COVID does tend to go after is the mitochondria, and mitochondria uses vitamin B1, B2, B3 in particular to create those energy, well, down the energy pathways to create that energy molecule. So, if you're not getting enough, then your mitochondria is not able to put out energy as well. And there's just, how do I want to say this? It's just well, it's mitochondrial dysfunction. NAD is a big one that is out there right now. NAD is basically B3. So it's niacinamide. Well, NAD, okay. So NAD, there's NAD and then there's NADH. And one is the active form and one's the inactive form. Like there's an electron chain exchange, and that's how it's activated, and that's how you use it down the energy pathways. It's needed for several different pathways. So vitamin B2 and B3 are needed for practically, there's so many processes in your body, almost all of them. So it's really important that you're feeding that pathway so that you're producing energy and you're preserving the mitochondria. Anything else to help the mitochondria? Potentially CoQ10. Again, you do want to talk to your doctor if you're on several medications about CoQ10. It's usually recommended about 200 milligrams a day in particular for CoQ10. It's the beginning of that pathway. Um, Other things that really helps with the mitochondria, there's malic acid, so that's malate. You can actually get magnesium malate, which can help with those energy pathways as well, and it's also going to be calming down to your system. So the nutrients we talked about, so coconut oil is a big one. It's about, actually in the studies, it was 2 tablespoons of coconut oil, but 1 tablespoon of coconut oil contains about 6 grams of lauric acid, so you've got a lot in there. So their studies showed 12 grams of lauric acid. But you can still get away with, I believe it's about 1,800 milligrams of monolauric acid that they recommend for the highest dose, and then the lowest as a preventative for 600 milligrams. Other lifestyle things, making sure that you are surrounding yourself with the right people. I've really started to hone in on this, is reforming your mind. It says that everybody knows that I am Christian. My faith is very, very important to me. And one of the things that it says in the Bible is to reform your mind. There's also a lot of other great speakers out there that have discussed this. Joe Dispenza is one of them. I believe Tony Robbins talks about this. Um, I'm trying to think of who else there is, but those are some other names. And what that does is it helps with new neural pathways. And when you help those new neural pathways and you start to break free from your past, it's actually decreasing the amount of stress that's on your body, and that's going to decrease inflammation. Now, one of the things that most profound things that one of my professors said to me is one of the most pro-inflammatory things for your body is actually your thoughts. So whether that looks like meditation in the morning, prayer time, Bible reading, devotionals, time where you have those affirm mantras and your mind is starting to actually hear what your words, that can be extremely beneficial in healing from COVID because it's actually decreasing that amount of stress that's in your body. Plus, it's making you feel a heck of a lot better. It's setting you up for transformation in 2025. So, really, you're getting transformation along with this preventative measures and this also preventing any sort of long term effects from COVID as well. It's, is there another one that I feel like I am missing? One really, really important one here. Oh, hydration. I think that's part of nutrition, though. Making sure that you are hydrating. So, one of the things in particular that if you are prone to clotting, so for me, another pre existing condition that I did have, I have a genetic predisposition to clot. I am homozygous for it, so I really have to be on top of that. So, it's not only omega 3s, but making sure that you do hydrate properly. Now, thing is, if you are having about a gallon of water a day, you need to have something else in there. And it's a little thing called electrolytes, like I was talking about before. Because if you're having too much water, you're basically gonna flood the system out from any sodium, and you need sodium and potassium in there. So making sure you're getting your fruits and vegetables, making sure that you're getting your electrolytes. I usually recommend if you have like a 32-ounce water bottle, that's what I have, putting some sort of an electrolyte tablet in there or putting an electrolyte powder in there so that you're not flushing out the sodium. Because if you flush out sodium, then your brain's going to be all out of whack, your heart rate's going to be all out of whack, and you're just not going to be a happy camper. You're not going to be recovering properly, and you're going to be fatiguing a heck of a lot more with your performance as well. So incorporating the electrolytes, plus it also helps with your adrenals when you are an athlete or when you are somebody who is really, really stressed or going through this long COVID, then that's really taking a toll on the HPA axis. So having electrolytes to be able to balance that out is going to be really key to healing during this time. All right, I think that I have pretty much covered everything. Again, this is a really big thing that COVID is not just COVID. I finally am feeling, I didn't relapse with fibromyalgia this year because I finally figured it out. Now, another thing that's really important is with biohacking is seeing what your cells are actually doing, getting a metabolic snapshot of everything in your body, checking your gut. I checked my gut, I checked my hormones, I checked my energy pathways, all of that. That's really, really important. And I do highly recommend that you seek out a licensed professional that's able to run those tests for you so that we can get you the right nutrients, we can get you on the right lifestyle plan, the right nutrition plan, and really have you performing your best and preventing any sort of relapse or preventing any of these long-term effects so that, guess what? You're going to get your quality of life back. You're going to be performing your best. And if you want to be surfing when you're 94, like I do, then you're going to be surfing when you're 94. All right, so some of the keys that I was talking about with COVID. So why is it such an issue? The spike proteins it's creating a lot of inflammation in your body. It's affecting your joints and connective tissue. It's attacking your brain, your heart. It's creating that adrenal fatigue. It's creating it's I didn't talk about this, but dysautonomia. So it can create that lethargy and that brain fog. Now, some of the things that we can start to do to counteract that so we're still performing our best and we're recovering our best, incorporating an anti inflammatory nutrition plan that is unique for your needs, including nutrients such as monolauric acid, and that's also in coconut oil, vitamin D, a lot of anti inflammatory and antioxidants. I talked about magnesium malate and malic acid to help with energy pathways. I talked about B vitamins, particularly NAD, is getting a heck of a lot of press right now, but it's basically B3 because it helps with energy production. So, really, you want to help the mitochondria to start to function properly again so that you're producing energy because everything in your body needs energy. And I think that was the last thing that hydrating. But omega 3s and hydrating. Omega 3s, that's going to be anti clotting because what happens with COVID is that there can be that micro clotting. So it's really important. Oh, another thing, one last thing before I end, to prevent microclotting or to prevent clotting, making sure that you are moving as much as you can. What I personally did, because I know a lot of us work on laptops, I got a walking pad and I have been walking and my body actually is craving it. So by having that movement on top of drinking your water and having your electrolytes, that's going to help decrease the risk of any sort of clotting issue, which could result in stroke, could result in fatigue. It just could result in overall your quality of life being significantly hindered. So with that, there's so much more. I just kind of just touched on the surface. I've done a lot of research into this. My own personal story. I went from relapsing twice from fibromyalgia, or I should say, I've gone from relapsing twice with fibromyalgia to now finally being on the other end, very much of it tied to COVID. I have gotten my athletic performance back. I am able to train again. I'm able to listen to my body. And now I am going to be doing another half Ironman in July. So if you really want to see what's going on with your body, if you have had COVID, if you have had COVID, if you had any of the vaccines, I would really highly recommend sign up for that 1 hour strategy call. It's absolutely free. We'll go over the goals that you have, whether it even be weight loss, it's gut issues, or there could be those of you out there that are really struggling with your health. I would absolutely love to speak with you. I'd love to go into a little bit more depth into all of these things and give you some very specific strategies that I've used and some very specific, even some tests that I've used to be able to get that metabolic snapshot. So we have you going, you're going to attack 2025 in your healthiest state, and it's going to be the healthiest year yet. So make sure you sign up for that free 1 hour strategy session. The link is in my bio. And for those of you that are on Facebook, it is in the comments. Okay. All right. So, everybody, my name is Drew Mulvey. I'm a certified dietitian nutritionist, board certified nutrition specialist, and certified integrative sports nutritionist. Obviously, I am very much integrative medicine and functional medicine focused. I work with both athletes and non athletes to repair their relationship with food, to really repair their cellular makeup so that their body is functioning properly and recovering properly, so that they are attaining their performance goals, their athletic goals, and their life goals, and that you live the best life and the longest life possible. I'd absolutely love to speak with you. If that's you, that was me. If I could do it and I could do it for my clients, I could do it for you. And I'm very excited to speak with you. All right, everybody. Well, stay warm out there. And also, prayers are with those that are in California right now, those that are in LA. Please make sure that you are praying for them and keeping them covered through this time. Okay, everybody. Have a wonderful Friday. Take care. Bye bye.